For as long as we've been human, for as long as we've been able to look up at the night sky, we've been wrestling with the exact same questions. The really, really big ones.
I mean, why is there something instead of nothing? What is all this stuff around us actually made of? And is there some kind of logic to it all? A grand plan? These aren't just late-night dorm room questions. They are the very heart of all philosophy and all science. Well, way back in ancient Greece, one guy was bold enough to say, you know what, I'm going to try and answer all of it. His name was Aristotle. And he didn't just have a few ideas. He built an entire blueprint for reality that was so convincing, it basically ran the show in Western thought for 2,000 years. So the question is, was he a genius who cracked the code of the universe? Or was his amazing system built on some pretty shaky ground? Let's dig in. Okay, so first, let's talk about the strengths. We have to understand why his ideas were so powerful for so long. What he did was build a universe that, really, for the first time, just made sense. Aristotle's big idea, and this was truly revolutionary, was actually pretty simple. He said, if you want to understand the world, you have to start by looking at it. Don't just sit around and theorize. Get out there, observe, collect the data. This is the bedrock of what we now call empiricism. And this is where you really see him as one of the first true scientists. I mean, his own teacher, Plato, thought that true reality was in some other dimension, this abstract world of perfect forms. Aristotle? No way. He was the guy who got his hands dirty. He literally studied and cataloged hundreds of species of marine animals, trying to figure out the rules from the world itself. He believed knowledge comes after you have an experience. Or, as the philosophers say, it's a posteriori. But just seeing what was happening wasn't enough for Aristotle. He was obsessed with the question, why? And to tackle that, he came up with this incredible intellectual toolkit, the four causes. It's basically a system for explaining anything and everything that exists. Let's use a statue to see how it works. It's super simple. First, you have the material cause. That's the stuff it's made of, right? The marble. Then there's the formal cause. That's the blueprint, the shape the artist has in their head. The efficient cause is the person or thing that actually makes it happen, the sculptor with the chisel. And then, and this was the most important one for Aristotle, you have the final cause. Its purpose, its telos, its reason for being. For the statue, it's to be a beautiful piece of art. For Aristotle, everything had a final cause. Okay, but this leads to a huge philosophical headache, right? If everything that happens is caused by something else, which was caused by something before that, and on, well, what kicked the whole thing off? What pushed the first domino? You can't just have causes going back forever. That's an infinite regress, and it just doesn't work logically. Aristotle's solution was, frankly, brilliant. He argued there must be a first cause, something that started all the motion and all the change in the universe without being caused or moved by anything else. He called it the prime mover. And this is just such a powerful concept. For one, it completely solves that infinite regress problem. Poof, gone. It explains why the universe isn't just sitting there, static, why there's constant motion and growth. It's also the simplest explanation that fits, something we call Occam's razor. And what's really wild is that this ancient idea for a first cause kind of echoes in modern physics when we talk about things like the Big Bang, this initial event that set everything in motion.
So, there you have it, a universe based on observation that's logical and driven by purpose. It seems pretty solid. But over the next couple thousand years, other thinkers and scientists started poking at it, and they found some pretty deep cracks in the foundation. So now, let's look at the case against Aristotle's reality. The first, and maybe the biggest, challenge is aimed right at his favorite idea, the final cause. This belief that everything has an built-in purpose. The critique is simple but devastating. Are we sure that's real? Or are we just projecting our human need for meaning onto a universe that might not care one bit? Just because a hammer has a purpose, does that mean the whole universe has to have one too? Modern science especially gives this idea a really hard time. Darwin's theory of evolution shows that traits come from random mutation and survival, not some grand design. I mean, what's the final cause of the human appendix or male nipples? They seem pretty purposeless. Then you've got philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre who argue we create our own purpose. We aren't born with one. And heck, even a kitchen knife's purpose isn't fixed. You can use it as a screwdriver in a pinch, right?
So the next crack appears in the very foundation of his whole system, observation. Aristotle's entire world is built on the idea that we can trust our senses. But can we really? We've all seen optical illusions. Our senses can absolutely be fooled. Thinkers like Descartes famously pointed this out, but the real knockout punch came from David Hume. He argued that we never actually see one thing causing another. All we see is one event happening, and then another event happening right after it, over and over. We just assume there's a causal link, but we can't ever prove it just by looking. But maybe the most damaging hit to Aristotle's system comes from Aristotle himself. You remember his 4 causes? He had one ironclad rule. Everything that exists in the physical world has to have a material cause. It has to be made of something. He held that rule as absolute, except for the single most important piece of his entire cosmic system. The prime mover, the ultimate cause of everything in the universe, is described as pure form, pure thought, with no matter. It's not made of anything. So in his grand finale, Aristotle breaks his own #1 rule. And there's another massive problem. Aristotle says the prime mover is perfect, unchanging, totally detached from our messy world. He called it thought thinking about thought. Okay, fine. But if it's completely disconnected from the material world, how in the world can it cause motion in the material world? There's no way for it to interact. It's like a remote control with no batteries and no television. So yeah, his system has some pretty big holes. But that absolutely does not mean we should just throw it in the trash bin of history. To really get Aristotle's true importance, you have to look past whether his specific answers were right or wrong. When you boil it all down, you can see these central tensions, right? His empiricism was genius. It grounded knowledge in the real world. But our senses can fool us. His idea of a final cause gave the universe a beautiful sense of purpose. But that idea gets hammered by evolution and chance. And his prime mover brilliantly solved a huge logic problem. But it was self-contradictory and had no way to actually do its job. And this, right here, is his real legacy. It's not the blueprint of the universe he drew up. It's the tools he gave us to draw our own. His commitment to logic, to systematic classification, to basing arguments on evidence, this way of thinking became the absolute foundation for the next 2,000 years of science and philosophy. Let's be honest, today, Aristotle's specific blueprint for reality seems pretty outdated. Science has given us a picture of a universe that runs on physical laws, on chance and probability, not necessarily on purpose. But that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. In rewriting his blueprint, did we actually find better answers, or did we just get tired of asking his biggest, deepest, and most important question of all? Why?